Okay, you better close the door so I didn't realize. Sorry. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Shame I can't commit to a specific time for the shiur, and that way you can join me. I must apologize in advance for any disturbances. It's anyway. I mean, speaking here from Nether Rosdale, boiling hot, and we're in the middle of quite a interessant Succca, so try and ease us back into it. The halacha is there's such a thing called yodos for tumah. Yodos for tumah works that even though if you touch a branch, it does not become tummy, because a branch, after all, is not a food. Since it's not a food, it can't become tummy. But if it's a handle for food, so it does become tummy. So the halacha is, for example, just like if you touch the handle of a pot, the pot becomes tummy because the handle is important for the pot. Also, if you touch a bunch of grapes and you pick it up from the stalk, then the stalk transfers tumah and catches tumah, because at the end of the day, it's needed for the fruit. Now, what happens if you don't want the handle? Then there's no dinyodes. For example, if a person is trying to make wine, so the stalks disturb him. Since the stalks disturb him, so therefore the halacha is that there's no tumah through the stalks, because it doesn't want the stalks to ruin the wine. Regarding a succah, it's not so straightforward. Because regarding a succah, on one hand, one does not want the fruit, because since the fruit are mekabel tumah, therefore they ruin the schach. On the other hand, the person doesn't want the person wants the fruit to keep the schach in place. If you've got grain with the stalk without grain, the stalk will fly away. So the grain keeps it in place. The Gemara brought a machlokas as to whether you can use the schach. Does the schach, the stalk, have to outweigh all the grain plus the stalks of the grain, or not? The Gemara suggested that the machlokas is dependent on the situation. When you harvested the grain originally to eat it, then you want the stalks. And then you just change your mind and you wanted it for schach, whether you don't want it anymore as a handle. And the Gemara says that cannot possibly be, because the halacha is that tumah, once it becomes tumah, does not lose the status of tumah just because you change your mind. We gave the example that if you're making shoes, so then what happens is the leather does not become tumah until it becomes shoes. While it's still a flat piece of leather, it's not become tumah because it's not usable. If you decided to make a blanket, so it is mekabel tumah, because at the end of the day, a blanket can be used. If a person originally decided to make it into a blanket and then changes his mind to make it into shoes, it doesn't help him to take away the tumah, because tumah does not disappear, but machshava only through a pula. So we're up to Yudalad Amudalaf, 5 lines from the top. But it says like this. That's talking about actual kelim. Tumah doesn't change, because kelim are choshuv, aval yodos, but the handles. That's only for the sake of food. A thought makes it tamei, and a thought takes away from tumah. But that's not true. We're going again to this halachas of yodos tumah. We're talking about something that's got a threshing floor, and he's got massive amounts of grain and stalks, and he does something to the stalks. And the question is, by doing this to the stalks, is it take away from tumah or not? The Gemara is going to evaluate later, analyze what does the word shabbosason even mean. But at this stage, the Gemara just brings a machlokas. Shabbosason begun to hovis, abusim etam. What happened was like this. Now, bosason means that what he just did is he untied the bundles. By untying the bundles, so all he was trying to do was show that he's not interested in the handles. Normally, a person wants the stalk to be able to handle the grain. By untying the bundles, he's showing that he's not interested. So therefore, you can see, Taka, that even though bosason is untying the handles, it's a very minimal act. Afal Pikein, it has the power to take away the kreach hatuma. So that shows that machshava can undo kelim. Bossam means that you crush the stalks and you do an act of crushing the stalks to show that you do on the stalks. That we see even regarding Yodis Tumah, in order to take away the status of Tumah, you actually have to do an act of crushing the stalks, but just thinking that you don't want the stalks doesn't take away the Tumah. And for the case we talk about where a person used the grain for his schach, we're talking about where he crushed the stalk. Since he crushed the stalk, so therefore it's not. It's clear that he doesn't want the stalks to be as a handle for the grain, and that's why there's no tumah. What's the swab of the achevim that they say that it's still you can't, that for schach it's no good? As well, Abisi holds that even after you crush the stalks, it's still got the din of yodis tumah. How can you compare? You can use them to turn them over with a pitchfork. And it says more to be able to gather them with the bits that will be made. I'll explain this a little bit. Again, for something to be considered yodis tumah, it has to be that the yad has some value, has to be usable on some level. So what can it be used for? So the Gemara says like this. Originally the Gemara understood that the stalks are there to be able to handle the grain, to be able to reach the grain, to be able to eat it, to be able to thresh it, whatever. But here we'll talk about grain, where you've got to crush the stalks. The Gemara says there's still a value to it. Regarding achila, regarding the threshing floor, the value is like this. That if you ever want to turn over the grain, part of the process of making grain royal to be eaten is that you have to turn it over to dry out properly. That if you'd have grain only on its own, it would be very, very difficult to turn it over with a pitchfork. But because the grain is attached, even to crush stalks, it has the ability to be turned over much easier. Similarly, says the Gemara, by schach, even when you crush the stalks, you have the advantage. What's the advantage? Is that after Succca, so you want to take all the schach off, you gain that you can take the schach off by just by the fact that it's attached to some stalks. So if it's easy to take the schach off, it's about gufa. That Gemara just explains that previous Gemara. Shabosim begun to hear us of Yisroel Tamim my boss. My boss mamish means to crush them. That what you did was you untied the bundles. They undid the bundles, hiding them. That's what Beis Matami. Since it is possible to turn them over with a pitchfork, they still have some value. It says, why is the tefillah of a tzaddik compared to an essa? Essa is a pitchfork. The pasuk says by Yitzchak Avinu, after 20 years of not having children, he davened to Hashem. Vayeta Yitzchak laHashem noichach ishto. The pasuk uses the word vayeta. Vayeta is not the normal way of tefillah. Normally it says vayispalel. Here it uses the word vayeta. Why does it say the word vayeta? Lo malacho ma'esa zeh, just like this pitchfork. Turns over the grain from one place to another. After the tefillah of a tzaddik is so powerful that it can literally turn over from midas rachmim to midas hadid to midas rachmim. So for the apostles, there's a power that tefillah has that it, just like a pitchfork can pitch things over and turn things over. Also, the tefillah of a tzaddik has the power to turn over the midas of Hashem from midas hadid to midas rachmim. Now the Mishnah talks about more halachas of schach. Min hadin, if you'd have big boards of wood, you'd actually have kosher schach. We said there are 3 conditions for schach to be kosher. The 3 conditions has to grow, not mekabel tumah, and it has to be detached from the ground. So a massive board would be okay. So theoretically, you would get nice, wide wooden boards and put them across your schach. And in that way, it'd be dead easy instead of having worries about insects and about is it too much schach, too little schach? Just take boards, put them across the Succca, and you'd have a marvelous Succca. In fact, I have been to a Succca. I remember there was a Talmud Chacham Kiryat Sefer that what he used was thin wooden boards. Each board was about 5 centimeters wide, but literally what we use to keep the schach up, he used it as schach. And every year we discuss the shaila whether that was a good sukkah or not. To come to it later. But it's interesting because at the end of the day, it's been the simplest thing. Wooden slats, just use wooden slats and that's it. The major problem with it is not min haTorah. Min haTorah, all wooden boards are fine. As we said, there are 3 conditions. If they're not makabel tumah, it's growing, it's grew, and it's not growing anymore. So wooden boards min haTorah are perfectly fine. The problem is only midrabanan. The problem is, if a person comes into a sukkah which has wooden slats, wooden boards, what will happen is he'll confuse this with a normal house. And he'll say to himself, if this is okay, a normal house is okay, or so we should say a normal room. And what will happen is people will make themselves a room, not for the sake of sukkah, not for the sake of shade, but simply for, let's say, to store things. And then come in and say, what's the difference with that and the sukkah that I had last year with boards? So Chazal forbade, according to one shitta, boards, because it looks too much like a house and therefore it's easily confusable. Says the Mishnah, Besachim with the sword of Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda holds that boards are okay. He doesn't agree with this. But Meir Isa, Meir forbids. If the board is 4 tvachim wide, it is kosher. As long as you don't sleep underneath it. So this Mishnah seems to say that as if the wooden slats are less than 4 tvachim, you're fine. So the simplest sukkah would be to get wooden boards less than 4 tvachim. 4 tvachim, according to the Chazon Ish, is about 36 centimeters. To get 30 centimeter wide boards, and you've got a marvelous sukkah, be dead easy. We'll come to it in a moment why not. You can't sleep underneath it. Now, this is talking about arbot tefachim, so even more than 4 tefachim, it's fine. I just want to point out this halacha is going to come again and again, and it's very, very vital. There's a huge difference between putting schach posel around the sukkah or through the middle of the sukkah. If you put schach posel around the sukkah, the halacha is it is kosher because of dofen akum. In fact, it is kosher so much so that it is kosher up to 4 amos. So what happens is, if you've got schach posel all the way around your sukkah, you're absolutely fine. Because what happens is, we just say dofen akuma. Dofen akuma is as if the roof, as if the walls bend in. The problem is, though, we don't say dofen akuma in the middle of a sukkah. If you put 4 tvachim of schach posel in the middle of a sukkah, it becomes possible. In this Mishnah, which says, we're discussing a situation, only says Rashi, when you put it around the walls. So by the corner, by the sides of the sukkah. But the middle of the sukkah, it's no good. Omarav. Now, we had a machlekes in our Mishnah regarding boards. So Meir Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds it is okay. Rabbi Meir holds it's no good. And now we have a machlekes within a machlekes. A machlekes in the machlekes. A machlekes Rav and Shmuel regarding the machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. Says like this: Amar Rav, machlekes b'nisom sheish ben abod. I've got 4 tvachim. Avo b'nisom she'ein ben abod. They don't have 4 divakul kshero. So again, machlekes sheish ben abod. I've got 4 to Rabbi Meir. It's exeras tikro. He's scared that you confuse it with the ceiling. Rabbi Yehuda less exeras tikro. Avo b'nisom she'ein ben abod. If they don't have 4 divakul kshero, the agrees is kosher. Let me take this. According to Rav, it's very, very mikol. Up to 4, everybody agrees it's fine. 4 and above is no good. Now we say always, Rabbi Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So the chayve should be mutter even by 4, according to Rav. If there's no 4, that's machlekes. If there is 4, dibakul kshero, everybody agrees it's okay. So sorry. Yeah, according to Shiur, machlekes is up to 4. Once it's 4, everybody agrees it's possible. According to Rav, up to 4 is kosher. By 4 and up, it's machlekes. According to Shmuel, up to 4 it's machlekes. 4 and above, everybody agrees it's possible. Anything is also the normal beams. What's wrong with them? The sticks. It's not a choshev, it's less than 4. And this is actually the Ikka halacha. Let me take it. From 0 to 3, it's absolutely fine. From 3 to 4, That's the machlekes of Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Meir says it's no good. Rabbi Yehuda says it is okay. We pass like Rabbi Yehuda. 4 and above, it's no good. And that's why if you use wooden slats in your sukkah, up to 3 tvachim, it is okay. There a shitta that holds that to use only slats is a problem. Because when you use only slats, it looks too much like a roof. But that is the machlokes of you. Again, let's get it clear. According to Shiur, up to 3, every degree it's okay. 3 to 4 is the machlokes. 4 and above, every degree it's no good. According to Rav, up to 4, every degree it's okay. 4 and above, that's machlokes. Says the Gemara. Tanan, nosan le nesa shuach v'abot tvachim kashay. It's got 4 tvachim wide. It's kosher. Uvad shelo yishim tachtav, as long as it's going steep underneath it. Bisham lishmon dama b'shem ben v'abo machlokes. Machlokes when it's got less than 4. Aviyesh ben abo divako poso b'shuach lo yishim tachtav. The end of the Mishnah says up 4, you shouldn't steep underneath it. That's very good. Because Shmuel holds that once it's 4, every degree it's no good. El Rav dama b'shesh ben abo machlokes. The machlokes is only when there's 4. But ben abo divako ksher, if it's less than 4, every degree it's kosher. Why does the Mishnah say don't steep underneath it? The Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's okay. I said, well, be sovis divakoli, safe also no amel. According to Rav, you're going to have to say that the concluding statement of the Mishnah, that when there's 4, you shouldn't sleep underneath it, it's not a universal statement. It's not according to everybody. It is only according to Amir. So you have to read the Mishnah like this. Even according to Amir, but not if you sleep underneath it, but it's only going according to Amir. The Rabbi Yehuda would hold that you're even allowed to sleep under 4. So the whole last statement of the Mishnah is all Shittas Amir. Says the Gemara, Toshba, Shnei Stinim Mitztaf, in top of your Dalet on Beis. 2 sheets. Sheets are also Mekabel Tumah. Sheets are Mekabel Tumah. So if you can't use them as Chach. So if you use 2 sheets, but no good, you cannot use Maschach. Top of your Dalet on Beis. Shnei Nesoim, a Mitztaf, but 2 boards not Mitztaf. But Me'emaf Nesoim Kestinim, also boards are like sheets. Now, so we've got machlokes whether you can 2 boards are us or not. Tanakama says 2 boards are okay. We don't say 2 boards next to each other are us like stinim. But Meir says it is us. So Moshe now goes to analyzes this both according to Rab and then according to Shmuel. When there's no 4. When there's 4, every degree it's possible. According to Shmuel, everybody agrees when there's 4 is no good. So the machlokes in this Beis are whether 2 boards next to each other, which are each one is small, whether they're mitzdarf, that machlokes is when the 2 together become 4. But when there's less than 4, it's kosher. When there's 4, it's machlokes. What's the case? Why does Amir need to say you need to join them? Amir anyway holds that it is awesome. So if the board is 4, anyway he holds it's no good. So we're talking about where each individual board must be less than 4. If it's less than 4, so according to Shmuel, what's the problem? So according to Rav, what's the problem? If it's 4, it's no good anyway. If it's less than 4, then it's completely kosher schach. So why should we mitzvah? And it's what this we're talking about a completely different situation. We're not talking about whether the schach is kosher in the middle. We're talking about a person used a board of 4, which according to Rav, according to Amir, is no good. But since it's at the side of the sukkah, it's not a problem because of Deifid Akuma. Nevertheless, the Gemara says that since you've got many of them, one after the next, so what happens is you're going to have a Deifid Akuma, as we said, only reaches 4 amos. So if you put many boards which are more than 4 amos, then it's no good. So that means you put many boards, each one 4 tefachim, and together it comes to more 4 amos, then it's no good, and that's the chiddush of this price. So another version, a similar version of this shaila. Says the machlokes say when there's no 4. When there's 4, it's possible. So then when it joins up for the 4 amos on the side. It joins up for 4 amos with that side. If it's got 4, it's kosher. My aim is starving. Who cares? According to Rabbi Yehuda, not only it shouldn't be mitzdaref, it's actually kosher sukkah. Normally when we say mitzdaref, we've got two pieces which are problematic. You put them next to each other, the question is, do they join together to create a psuk? But according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rav, he holds that even if there's four, it is kosher. So if that's the case, why should it be mitzdaref? It's kosher schach. That's why I did come on mitzdaref, and Rabbi Yehuda ain't mitzdaref. He just used the same lashon. But really, according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rav, it's actually properly kosher schach. Tadik was the Rav, Tadik was the Shmuel, Tadik was the Rav, Succca with the son she'eres, if you do see the wood, she'ein bo in abo that have no four, diva kol kshir. Yesh with abo, mer pois Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Says before like Rav, that the machlokes is only 4 and above. But under 4, everybody agrees it's okay. We use boards that are 4 tvachim wide. Rabbi Yehuda says there was a time when there was a decree, nobody was allowed to sit in the sukkah. There was a decree nobody was allowed to sit in the sukkah. Since there was a decree, nobody was allowed to sit in the sukkah. What did they do? They made a porch, and on the porch they used boards which are 4 tvachim wide. And in that way, the government did not realize, because to them it looked like a normal room, and that way they were yotza. Says Rabbi Yehuda, you see from the fact that they use boards which are 4 tvachim wide, that 4 tvachim is okay. Because if 4 tvachim were no good, what did it help by us pretending that it's a room and using these 4 tvachim boards? If it is no good, so then what did everybody gain by doing this in this hidden way? Is that a proof? Times of danger is not a proof. The really 4 tvachim boards are no good. The only reason they used them at that time was because they had no choice. It was a time of a decree, so they had no choice. The Maisa, the Rishonim over here discuss a problem. We mentioned right at the outset that the problem with these boards is not deiraisa. Because min ha-Torah, these boards are certainly okay. They're only asim d'Rabbanan. Since they're only asim d'Rabbanan, so then of course, at a time when you've got no choice, of course you're going to use these boards. If you've got sukkah, you've got no kosher schach with ha-Torah. You've got schach which is kosher with ha-Torah. But with d'Rabbanan it's no good. So at least you've got schach which is kosher with ha-Torah. Why can't they use it? The Rishonim say that from Rabbi Yehuda we see that Chazal did not want people to use schach which is possibly d'Rabbanan, even in emergency, because they were concerned that if people do, they'll get used to using it, and even when the emergency goes away, they'll continue to use it, and that's why it's no good. Okay. If it's 4, it's possible. If it's no 4, it's machlekes of Rabbi Yehuda. If you put between each board kosher schach, and there's as much kosher schach as schach possible, then it is kosher. You can't sleep underneath it. If you put a board of 4 tvachim at the side, it is kosher because of Deifid HaKumah. When you sleep underneath it, you're not yotza, because you don't not yotza. Deifid HaKumah works that the schach underneath the schach is kosher, but not that you can sleep underneath, which is a Deifid HaKumah. I just want to summarize. So we've shown like this. A wooden board min ha-Torah would be kosher because it's growing, it's not a kamatuma, it grew from the ground, so it's kosher schach. With Rabbanan, they were concerned that people were confused that with a normal room and they forbade it. When did they forbid it? That's machlekes of Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. The machlekes of Rav and Shmuel, when was the machlekes of Meir and Rabbi Yehuda? According to Rav, Rabbi Yehuda always permits it. And the Meir only forbids it if it's more than 4 tvachim. Less than 4 tvachim, it's always kosher. According to Shmuel, up to 3 tvachim, it's always kosher. 3 to 4 is machlekes. 4 and up, everything agrees it's no good. Now, what would be the case when you use the boards which are more than 4 tvachim, which we said are no good? But instead of using them flat as 4 tvachim, you use them standing up. There are 2 ways to understand this. On one hand, you can say, since they are standing on the edge, and the edge is only a tefach wide, and that edge does not look like a wooden board, so therefore it's okay, because at the end of the day, that's not a problem of wooden boards. Or you could say, once Chazal told us not to use wooden boards, it doesn't matter how you use them. If you use them even standing upright, it's no good. This is the next shaila of the Gemara. It's geschmack shaila. It's good to get it clear. Again, wooden boards without Torah, okay. Midrabanan, they're no good because it looks too much like a normal roof. What happens if you use wooden boards, but putting them upright? And then you put loads of wooden boards upright. And in that way, from sitting in the sukkah, all you can see is the tiny edge of the wooden boards. Since you're only seeing the tiny edge of the wooden boards, so therefore it should be okay. Or should you say, no, one said wooden boards is no good, so therefore it's no good. It says the word like this. It's dead if you put them on the sides. So Chisda came to visit him. What happens if you put it on your sides? It's possible. Why? Once Chazal said it's awesome, they said it's like metal slats. Metal slats are always possible. Did I not tell you you're going to say like me? Why did you have to ask him? You could have asked me. I would have told you the same answer. You told us the halacha, but you never told us the reason. If you'd have told us the reason, we might have listened to you. Did you ask me for the reason and I never told it to you? You never asked me for a reason. Had you asked me for the reason, I would have told you the reason. The Gemara says, let's prove it. If you've got a sukkah which doesn't hold enough to hold Rosh Ruboy v'Shulchan, or there's a hole at the bottom that a goat can get in. That means you've got the walls don't reach the floor, a goat can get in. Or you put a board which is 4 tvachim. Even if you only put 3 tvachim, it's possible. How can you have a board which is 4 tvachim wide, but there's only 3 tvachim inside the sukkah? The Gemara understood we're talking about a wooden block, which is 4 tvachim wide, 3 tvachim high. You then tilted it onto the side. It was 4 tvachim wide, 3 tvachim wide. You tilted it onto the side, and now it's only 3 tvachim in the sukkah. And Afar PK, the Beis says it's possible. Is a raya that it is possible. My love goes off for that did. Look. We're talking about you put the board of 4 tvachim at the entrance of the sukkah. But the gav 3 is inside the sukkah. And 1 tefach is out of the sukkah. It's like schach coming out of the sukkah. Psal is another word for schach, because psal comes from the word psolis goen v'yekev. And we said that psolis goen v'yekev is the best thing to use for schach. The sukkah, which comes out of the sukkah, is like a sukkah, and therefore over here we're talking about where you did the 4 tvachim out of the sukkah, and therefore that's what we're discussing over here. I just want to show you one small picture, if you can, over here. This picture over here is we're talking about where the sukkah is 4 tvachim and 1 tefach is out, so you've only got 3 tvachim in the sukkah. Here's the bit of Hoifchanad Sidein where the slats are on the sides. Not a brilliant picture, but it's a bit of a picture. Also, so that's the 2 shaylas of the Gemara as to whether it's kosher. Somebody asked me to see the view, so I'm going to take the computer outside. It's too hot to give the shiur outside because it'll get sunburned, and I'm going to take you outside. You can see the view a bit of this where I am. I don't know how good the lighting is. Can anybody? Anyway, this is the view from the other wall still, if you can see it. Maybe when it's a slightly cooler day, you can do the shiur outside, you can see it right through the thing. Now,